Forget the courtroom, forget the lawsuit, and forget Buckingham Palace for a second. According to the escalating controversy surrounding Meghan Markle, the real panic reportedly started when royal legal analysts began seriously discussing something many once laughed off as impossible. What if a royal title could vanish with a single signature? No courtroom showdown, no judge, no jury, no explosive legal spectacle, just one decision made at the very top. Suddenly, what seemed like another ordinary royal family dispute began looking far more serious. Because when a multi-million-dollar personal brand is tied directly to royal status, every challenge to that status becomes a possible disaster. For months, royal commentators have fixated on the same photograph, the same screenshot, the same social media post. Over and over, they cited it as evidence of something much larger. Yet while everyone remained focused on that image, another narrative was quietly developing behind the scenes. A narrative packed with contradictions, uncomfortable questions, unresolved concerns, and details that somehow slipped past most major headlines. And the further you dig, the stranger everything starts to look. The first sign emerged from a speech that appeared completely disconnected from the controversy. Meghan Markle stood before an international audience and passionately addressed the dangers children face online. The message was serious. The urgency in her tone was impossible to miss or dismiss. Adults, she argued, had failed an entire generation by allowing unhealthy digital spaces to flourish unchecked. The speech seemed carefully crafted to present her as an advocate, a guardian, someone speaking for vulnerable families. Then something changed. Only weeks later, reports surfaced involving conversations about her own children and their visibility online. Suddenly, critics started asking difficult questions. Why did the public message and the private reality seem so different? Was this merely another case of media distortion? Or was it part of a broader pattern where one story was presented publicly while another unfolded behind closed doors? Until recently, almost nobody appeared interested in connecting those dots. Meanwhile, as those questions grew louder and attracted increasing attention, another development quietly erupted beneath the surface. A new biography entered the discussion. Not just any biography, but one written by a journalist whose career was built on investigating powerful figures who definitely preferred not being investigated. The reaction came instantly. Supporters rejected it. Critics embraced it. Yet almost nobody seemed willing to read beyond the headlines. That is where things became truly interesting, because the controversy was never really about what people assumed was inside the book. It was about what was actually written inside it. And before getting there, another question deserves serious consideration. Why does this particular biography matter more than the countless others released before it? The answer begins with credibility. For decades, the author established a reputation by publishing unauthorized accounts about some of the most influential people in business, politics, and public life. Individuals with enormous resources, powerful legal teams, and every possible reason to challenge claims they considered false. Yet time after time, those books remained standing. That history does not automatically make every allegation accurate. Not even close. But it does explain why people pay attention whenever new claims emerge. And the response from the Sussex camp only poured more fuel onto the flames. The allegations were dismissed as conspiracy theories. Maybe that was a strong defense, or maybe it was a dangerous gamble. Because history has a strange habit of turning the phrase conspiracy theory into free publicity. The moment people hear those words, curiosity takes control. Suddenly, millions who never intended to investigate start asking questions. And questions can become very dangerous when the answers people want remain frustratingly unclear. Then came the issue that turned ordinary gossip into full-blown royal intrigue. Titles. Not opinions. Not headlines. Titles. Many people completely misunderstand how royal titles actually function. They picture endless legal proceedings, parliamentary arguments, and complicated courtroom battles. But legal commentators examining royal authority have suggested the reality may be far simpler than most people think. And that's exactly where the anxiety starts. Because if the power that granted a title still holds authority over that title, then the entire conversation changes. The spotlight moves away from courtrooms and toward palaces, away from judges and toward monarchs. One signature, one decision, one single moment. That possibility alone has fueled massive speculation. Yet perhaps the most explosive revelation has nothing to do with titles. Instead, it involves a story Meghan Markle has shared for years. A story that became one of the defining chapters of her public image, the famous dish soap letter. For years, audiences heard the inspiring account. An 11-year-old girl sees a commercial she believes is sexist. She writes letters. She speaks out. Change follows. It's a compelling story, inspirational, memorable, and perfect for speeches and interviews. And importantly, parts of it are undeniably real. There is footage. There are records. There is evidence showing she participated. But critics looking deeper uncovered something unexpected. Questions not about whether the letter existed, not about whether she cared, but about whether the story unfolded exactly as it has often been described. Researchers reportedly discovered evidence suggesting a larger campaign existed around the same issue. More participants, more moving parts, and more adult involvement than many audiences originally realized. Then came an even bigger complication: her own father. Because when family members start challenging public narratives, things become messy incredibly fast. Statements attributed to him suggested the famous story may not have been quite as straightforward as the lone warrior version repeated throughout the years. And suddenly, an uncomfortable question appeared. If the origin story contains disputed details, what else deserves another look? The answer may be hiding inside an agreement signed years later. An agreement that some critics now believe sits directly at the center of this entire controversy. The agreement is where everything starts feeling less like random gossip and more like a trail of breadcrumbs leading somewhere much bigger. Back in 2020, during the dramatic negotiations surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's departure from royal duties, terms were reportedly established that would define how they operated outside the institution. On paper, everything appeared clear. The transition came with rules. Boundaries existed. Expectations were understood. The royal family moved forward. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle moved forward. Case closed. Except critics now argue it was never really closed at all. Because over the years, moments continued appearing that caused people to revisit those original terms. A title here. A reference there. A correction captured on camera. A social media post that reignited old debate. Individually, every incident seemed minor and easy to dismiss. But together, they began forming a pattern that opponents found impossible to ignore. Claims involving private confrontations, alleged tensions behind palace walls, disagreements among senior royals, and conversations that, if true, painted a dramatically different picture from the polished public image many people had been shown. One allegation described a confrontation involving Prince William and Meghan Markle shortly after the royal wedding. Then came another claim suggesting senior members of the family privately held deeply negative views about the influence Meghan Markle allegedly had over Prince Harry. Now, it's important to remember these are allegations reported in a biography, not established facts. But what made them so explosive wasn't simply the content itself. It was how detailed, specific, and precise the claims appeared, combined with the fact they came from a writer whose previous investigations had repeatedly survived intense scrutiny. Even then, those revelations weren't necessarily the most damaging development. The most damaging development may have arrived from entirely outside the royal family, because former colleagues can sometimes create bigger problems than critics ever manage to. One former charity executive became a central figure in the controversy after publicly discussing her experiences. This wasn't an anonymous source hiding behind unattributed quote. This wasn't another tabloid rumor making the rounds. This was a named individual attaching her own reputation to serious criticisms involving Prince Harry's leadership and decision-making. And just like that, the story shifted once again. No longer was it only about titles. No longer was it only about biographies. Now it was about credibility. When people working directly inside an organization begin speaking publicly, observers pay attention. Donors pay attention. Partners pay attention. Future collaborators pay attention. According to reports, concerns allegedly emerged that the Sussex brand itself had become controversial enough to create hesitation among certain supporters and contributors. Whether those concerns were widespread or limited remains heavily disputed, but the very existence of those conversations raises difficult questions about perception versus reality. And perception matters, especially when your public image is among your most valuable asset. Which brings everything back to the issue that sparked this entire storm in the first place, the title. Because beneath every argument, every biography, every disagreement, every contradiction, and every public relations battle sits one lingering unanswered question. What happens if patience within the monarchy eventually reaches its limit? Royal commentators have suggested that while legal interpretations vary, the monarch may possess broader authority over certain royal titles than many people realize. If that interpretation proves correct, the ultimate threat isn't a courtroom battle stretching across years. It isn't a legal war fought under cameras and headlines. It's something much quieter, a decision, a signature, a moment that arrives without warning. And that's exactly why this story continues generating so much attention. Not because a title has already been removed. Not because a decision has already been made. But because every controversy, every disputed account, every awkward contradiction, every former colleague speaking out, every biography, and every public disagreement seems to add another layer of pressure to an already overflowing situation. The real mystery isn't whether the critics are right or wrong. The real mystery is how many more questions can pile up before someone with access to the complete picture decides to reveal what has remained hidden. And if that day ever arrives, the story everyone believes they already know may ultimately turn out to be only the beginning.